good to be back. We had a little hiatus, close to a month. 4 weeks of no Tanya class. The first one because it was Hanukkah. And we had a little Hanukkah event that you were at. Unfortunately, I was not at because I was sick.
They had the hostages.
Yes, I saw that. You were there too.
At Jeff's house.
At Jeff's house, Yaakov's house. And then I had the great merit to travel to the Holy Land, to Israel to visit my wife's family. One of the more powerful moments for me was getting to take my son to the Western Wall. 7 months old. And we went actually on the 10th of Tevet, on the fast day, which commemorates the day that the wall of Jerusalem was sieged. That's the day we went to be at the only surviving piece of the Holy Temple, which is a testimony to the fact that we're eternal. They tried to destroy us, but one wall stands. And it was very touching. And then we went from there straight to New York, where we were leading a little, one of the chapters, because they do every year, a Shabbaton in Crown Heights for young Jewish adults, 20s and 30s. It's with a goal to create Jewish marriages. That's the goal. So they had 750 young men and women come around, because it's like chapters, like you have Chabad houses all over the world. So recently they have these different demographic-oriented types of things. They have C-Teen, like Chabad Teen Network, and then they have what's called CYP, which is Chabad Young Professionals, which you're involved in a little bit, and have to get more involved. And we have chapters all over the world. So from 180 cities, they came out.
Wow. Are there yentas there?
Huh?
Are there like
There's yentas, there's shadchans, it was very cool. They did lectures, they did like speed dating events. Put 300 young adults in a room and they just put them on a table and you talk to each other, it's a whole thing.
So are you like on a pedestal? Like this is where
No. So what happens is no. So what happens is the rabbis and the rebbitzins, they lead it. Like you bring your people from the chapter, and then everyone gets together for Shabbos, and it was very, very inspiring. But again, for me, the most powerful times was not when I was with this program, but when I was able to bring my son to, first of all, to the Ohel, to the Rebbe's resting place, and to 770. But also on a personal level, to my grandfather and grandmother. I'm lucky enough that both my grandfathers and grandmothers are still alive. And so this was, so my father's parents live in Brooklyn, my mother's parents live in Detroit. Yeah. So we went for dinner to my grandparents, and it's just a blessing.
Where was that?
In Crown Heights. You just... Huh? No, just my grandparents, my father's parents. It was just like, to me, it was very, very poignant. It was like, first of all, legacy. You see continuity of generations. My grandfather, Baruch Hashem, is a great-grandfather many times over. But this is the first great-grandchild that carries the Lipsker last name. Because it's my father's, and then me, and then my son. No, not one of them is named Lipsker. There are boys. They just come through daughters. So it's different last name. But this is Lipsker. So he was very proud. And also it speaks to the Jewish value of having children young, and the idea of creating generational continuity in which one can take care of the other and bring such nachas to another. And it's just a blessing that I only wish upon each of us in this room, that our children should continue everything that we want for them to continue. And we have some Zaydis in the room, and we have some Zaydis to be. So everybody should merit to be a Zaydi very quickly, especially Reb Ephraim, whose son is engaged. And we don't know when the wedding is yet, but it's going to be this 2025? 2025? Okay, it's coming up. So that should be a conduit of blessing for more Zaydis and more shidduchs for those who need it. Anyway, that was just a little taste of the experience that I had, and Baruch Hashem, we're back, hit the ground running. So here we are. We're studying Tanya. And we're starting a new chapter, chapter 16. We did 15 last time in one class. It was a little bit rushed, but that's it. We're leaving it and we're moving on. Interestingly enough, in this Tanya that we use, the English Tanya, he labels the chapter as When Meditation Fails. That's the heading that he has for the chapter. And that's really a true definition, because the bulk of the chapter is going to be talking to a Beinoni who is not successful in using his mind to achieve emotional results. However, we have the good fortune of being able to study a little slower. So we're going to be focused on the beginning of the chapter today, which actually is not about meditation failing, but meditation succeeding. And the ideal way to go about this very, very important concept. And so to introduce that, I want to start with two stories. One is a story that I read 2 days ago, and one is a story that happened to me yesterday. So first, the story that I read 2 days ago. This is, I believe, sometime in the 60s or the 70s, and there was a father who had a daughter who was struggling to sleep at night. She had these fears, these irrational fears, as kids have sometimes. Monsters and all these kinds of good stuff. And he was struggling to get her to sleep. And he wrote to the Rebbe asking for advice. What can I do to help my daughter's fears? As a parenthesis, the Rebbe has very interesting takes on these things in other places when parents would write to the Rebbe about these struggles with his kids. And it was reflective of the Rebbe's general approach that nothing for a Jew is simply physical. Everything is a synthesis between the physical and the spiritual. And if a Jew is lacking in physical health, there also has to be some kind of spiritual equivalent which requires improvement. And the Rebbe writes that if the subject is a child who doesn't have the mental capacity yet to be informed and educated and learn about these deeper things, then the responsibility falls on the parent to improve their spiritual observance in order to help align their child's physical well-being. It's fascinating. Anyway, to this particular father, the Rebbe wrote that you should put a mezuzah next to her bed. Not on the door, that's a separate thing. In Jewish literature, we find that in many places that a mezuzah, just a scroll, is an omen for different types of protection. In fact, again in parentheses, the Rebbe would advise people to have a mezuzah on their desk or in their car, just as an omen of protection. So he writes to this father, you should have a mezuzah next to her bed. And you should explain to her that a mezuzah offers protection, and the mezuzah protects her from these fears. Anyway, a few weeks went by, and the mezuzah wasn't helping. She was still having these fears. So he writes back to the Rebbe, just going to pull it up here so I can see the exact quote. The father writes to the Rebbe, the mezuzah didn't work. You told me to put a mezuzah, it didn't work. What do I do? Listen to this. The Rebbe writes to him in Hebrew. The reason the mezuzah didn't help, apparently, the person who was supposed to do the explaining to the girl doesn't believe that the mezuzah could help. In other words, the Rebbe is telling him, you're the parent. You're obviously not showing true faith in the power of the mezuzah, and so, of course, it's not filtering down to the kid. That's story one. Story two happened to me yesterday. So, I drive a BMW, and it makes me look fancy. But as my friends say, it's just a BMW. That's all it gives me is just trouble. It's a donated car. Fascinating story behind the donation. There was a woman who used to be our secretary here, and her mom donated the car to Chabad. So I get to look good, but it doesn't actually perform as it's supposed to. And one of the issues that it gives me is with the battery. So anytime I leave the car off for more than, 12 hours at a time or 24 hours, it needs to be jump-started. So this whole Tishrei, it was a 3-day holidays the whole time. Rosh Hashanah, right?
If you park on a hill, then you can just roll it.
I can roll it down. So every time after the Shabbos, Thursday, Friday, Shabbos, 3 times in a row. So after Shabbos, I'm finding myself to jumpstart this car again and again. So I decided to buy one of these, portable jump starters that they have on Amazon, right? So it's like this battery, and then you charge it, and then it gives the charge. And it was working great. It has to be recharged, every so often, and this and that. So it's a 2-piece thing. So it's this battery, and then it's like this thing that plugs in with the 2 cables, right? So I just have it in my car, and that's the way it sits. Anyway, I went on this trip. 3 weeks I'm gone. So of course, I knew just to expect that my car is not going to start up again. So when I got back, first thing I did, I charged the battery and did the charge, and it worked. But I guess 3 days is one thing, but 3 weeks is another thing. So literally, I got back on Monday. Every time I parked my car, if I turned it off, it needed to be re-jumped. So I went to the mall and then shut it off, done. I come to Chabad, shut it off, try to leave after morning prayers, it's done. So now I got to charge this battery, again and again. And when you charge it, so the cable part, you have to separate it. So basically, I'm chasing around these pieces of battery and cables the whole day. I dropped it in my office, then I put it back in the car, and I'm always losing track of it. Anyway, last night, once a month I do a class for a group of doctors up in the mountains, and we do like a Kabbalah class. So there was 2 men that had lost their fathers in the last 3 weeks. So they said, you know what, let's go off our regular topic and talk about the Jewish approach to death and the afterlife. So it's a topic that I don't really know a lot about. I know different specific topics, but they had all these different questions. I had to spend some time researching it. I did a whole thing. I wrote up some notes. I printed it out, and I had it with me, ready to go to this class. And of course, I had my battery, just in case. And when I park it, if the car goes dead, it's not going to be. So, all this to say, what happened in this moment here? It's 6:30 yesterday in the p.m. And I got my battery. I'm ready to go. I had to go meet somebody before I went to the class. And I was walking back and forth, a whole bunch of things. I got to my car, I'm like, I'm ready to leave. I look to my right, there's the battery. I'm like, great, let's go. I start pulling out, and then I remember, the cables. Where's the cables? Where's the cables? I can't find it. I go into the shul, I start looking for it, it's not there. There. Then I remember, it's probably in the office. But I had just locked the office and left my keys somewhere else. So I'm walking back, and as I'm walking, I'm thinking, Hashem, look, what's going on? I got this whole battery issue, it's enough. And I have to go find my cables. I was very upset. I grab my keys, I go in to the office. Sure enough, there's the cables on the desk. And as I pull the cables ready to run into the class, I noticed that my pages of notes I left on the desk. And because of this, I was able to get it back and give the class successfully because it had a bunch of information that I didn't know I had to have access to. And it was a small story, but it hit me as I'm walking back to the car. I'm like, here Hashem was orchestrating it so that I could have the thing that I needed to have to give this class successfully. And in the moment, what did I do? I got upset. I questioned it. What's up with my belief in these things that I preach? Hashgacha pratis, divine providence, everything is orchestrated by Hashem. There's like a disconnect between what I'm saying and how I'm actually living.
You needed a recharge.
I needed a recharge. I needed a jump start to, to the perspective. This is actually true. And then, today, as I'm preparing for tonight's class, I came to the answer. And the answer is that I'm missing, and people in general many times are missing, a key ingredient to making things real. That's one. But the one for tonight is meditation. Hitbonenut is the Hebrew word. And it's something that I think it's overlooked in today's society, or maybe discounted. You hear people talk about meditation, contemplation, mindfulness. They get all like, well, either they get all new agey on you and like they love it and they embrace it, or they're just like, it's not for me. We don't stop to think today about things more than 10 seconds. I mean, it's unheard of to have people just sit and think about an idea. But one of the gifts that we have as people is the channel that's open between the mind and the heart. You know, how do you, in your life, okay, how do you concretize something? Either a value or a perspective or an idea. Typically, if you interview people, you're going to come across the general answer is a visceral experience. When did I realize God was in my life? When I was almost hit by the truck and I saw my whole life before me and then everything became real all of a sudden. Or I was going through a sickness or a positive experience. A baby is born. I had a friend, he told me that, he said he just had a first baby. He said, I stopped believing in God. So what do you mean? He says, now I know. Anybody who witnesses the miracle of pregnancy and childbirth, you know there is a God. So both on the positive side and the negative side, these things, these raw, intense things that happen to us, they seal things into our psyche in a way that nothing else can. But there's another way. It takes more work. It requires effort. But there's a natural way by which we can literally ingrain something inside of us. And that is meditation. Hitbonenut. It's not easy because it's not a sound bite. You know, it's not like you press play and then, I don't know, some video comes on and life-changing moment. Another friend who told me also the other day, he said, too many people in our culture talk about the problems of instant gratification for pleasure. But nobody talks enough about the instant gratification for meaning. Everybody wants to feel meaning. Send me a video, I'm going to watch it and I'm going to become transformed. Give me a 2-day Shabbaton and I'm going to be, at my best. Transform me while I'm standing on one foot. It's not how it goes. Just like pleasure needs to be delayed gratification, meaning also needs to be delayed gratification. You have to be willing to accept that there's a process you have to engage in that requires investment. But we have the power. One of the gifts of our intelligence is that we're able to sit and contemplate information and let it flow to the heart and make us feel things. We don't do it often enough, but we should. As a matter of fact, it's in Jewish law. When people would challenge the Rebbe many times, when they would ask him, where does it say that you have to learn Chassidus every day? Where does it say? Everything has to say in halacha, right? Where does it say? So he would say, open up a Shulchan Aruch, Code of Jewish Law, chapter 98, section 1. It says right there, before davening, 3 times a day, before Shacharis, Mincha, and Ma'ariv, Yitbonein ha'adam, a person needs to meditate, contemplate, Bigadlut hakel ubishiflut ha'adam, the greatness of God and the lowliness of man. So the Rebbe said, you tell me, where do we have a Jewish text that talks about the greatness of God and the inferiority of man? It's not in the Talmud. The Talmud talks about oxen goring sheep and people that loan each other money and take false oaths. The texts in which the being of Hashem and the relationship of man to Hashem is discussed at length are the texts of Chassidus. So if you want to be able to meditate on the greatness of God and lowliness of man before davening, you have to be engaged in Chassidic or Kabbalistic at least texts. So it's actually a requirement. A Jewish person is supposed to engage in meditation 3 times every day. At least for a second, at least for 10 seconds, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. And when we do that, it's actually more rewarding than a visceral experience, because a visceral experience is imposed upon you. But when you meditate in the proper way, it goes from the inside out. You have the time and the mental space to focus on an idea, to really zoom in on it, to take it apart, to examine all of its elements, to become one with it, to feel at home in it, and then you personalize it. And once something is personalized, it cannot go away, because it becomes part of the way you think, the way you look at the world. And in the beginning of this chapter, the Alter Rebbe calls on the Benoni to do just that. Why did the father in the story not sound convincing enough to his daughter with the mezuzah? Because he didn't truly believe it. How is he going to truly believe it? By meditating, by studying more, by making it more real. When something is real to you, it will become real to those that are next to you, because they'll feel that you're a true believer. And the Alter Rebbe says that's the ideal form of the Benoni. When we say the Benoni rules his instincts, but the Benoni is like me and you. We all have the same lusts, the same desires, the same cravings, but he doesn't give in. What's he using? What's the weapons in his arsenal that he's using to keep this discipline alive? It's the mind. It's the power of the mind that he's engaging, using to think about the greatness of Hashem, and how therefore he needs to be inspired to do what he has to do. You know what? Let's take a look at the Tanya inside, actually. I think this would be a good point to see in the text. It's page 189 if you have the English Tanya. 189. What we're going to do is, there's a lot of commentary here, you see, but we're going to just read the paragraphs that have the bold. So it's 2 paragraphs on top, skip to 1 in the middle, and then the line on the bottom. Look what he says. For Beinonim, this is literally the quote from chapter 16. For Beinonim and those who seek to become Beinonim, the worship of God has this one all-encompassing principle. The main thing is to dominate and control the natural tendencies of the animal soul in the heart's left chamber. Right, we're trying to control our animalistic nature. Skip to the next bold paragraph. Through the divine light which shines upon your divine soul that rests in the brain, the way you achieve dominion over the left animalistic part of yourself is through the right godly part of yourself which rests in the mind. Down to the bottom line, and to use the mind to rule over the heart. That's it. If you look in the Hebrew, it's got a really home run language. Klal Gadol, he says. Klal Gadol means like a huge principle. The rule, the golden rule. The golden rule for a Benoni who wants to serve Hashem is you're looking to control your left side. The method for that is to use the right side and to have the right side influence the left side. In this case, the mind influencing the heart. The heart's going to go places. But if you can get the mind to harness that, you will be in control. And how do you use the mind to control the heart? That he continues on the next page. And let's read it as well. because, again, this is just the Alter Rebbe's words. Nothing is more sweet than the golden tongue of the Alter Rebbe. The Rebbe used to call the Alter Rebbe's language Lashon HaZahav, the golden tongue, because every word is calculated and exact. So he says like this, third paragraph, 190. This happens through mindful meditation on the greatness of God's blessed infinite light, so that your powers of bina, cognition, give rise to a spirit of das, recognition, and reverence of God in your mind. That's a reference to what we had in chapter 3. Remember way back, the 3 parts of the mindful process. There's always an initial beam of light, like a lightning bolt. Then you have to filter it down, that's cognition. Then you recognize it and personalize it. And once you consider mindful meditation of God's greatness, what happens? 2 things happen. First, he says, again, I'm skipping the commentary, that reverence of God in Das enables you to make the firm decision to turn away from evil, to avoid anything prohibited biblically or rabbinically, down to even a minor rabbinic prohibition, God forbid. So that's on the one hand, distance, respect, awe. You're not going to violate the relationship. Next, he says, in addition to reverence, a fear of distancing yourself from God through transgression, your meditation should generate the positive feelings of love. And love of God will be generated in your heart, in its right chamber where the divine soul rests, with fervor and desire to attach yourself to Him through observing the biblical and rabbinic mitzvahs and the study of Torah, which is equal to them all. So when you contemplate the greatness of God, 2 things will happen. A, you'll be inspired not to do things which contravene that which Hashem wants. B, you'll be inspired to get closer to Him by doing the things that you know that He wants you to do. That's the mind-ruling heart in the context of the God-person relationship. We can exercise the mind over the heart in many ways. But here we're talking about in terms of relationship. You want to make Hashem real. How do you make Hashem real? By thinking about Him. By the way, you can only think about Him if you study about Him. Right? As with any idea. You can't think about an idea if you don't have an idea. You have to have an idea.
So this spirit of Das, is that like having an aha moment?
Yes, it's exactly it. It's when something becomes personalized in your mind, you go like, wow, now I get it. Then spend time meditating on that, and it'll actually flow down into the heart. Being inspired with love. What is love? Love means closeness, desire to connect. You'll do things that He wants that will connect you with Him. And then yirah is the distance, or the respect at least, where you won't mess it up.
Can you expand a little bit on the meaning of like meditating on the greatness of God? Because God is great.
Yes.
Such a grand concept.
So the truth is that I'm a little jumping ahead of myself if I would do that, because there's like 10 chapters or 11 chapters later on in the Tanya where he goes through specific meditations that you can have, which will help to bring out these feelings. It's chapter 41 through chapter 50, literally 10 chapters, one after another, of specific things to focus on. So maybe I'm not going to expand so much on it. But as a typical theme, we have the fact that God is present, that God is transcendent, and that God is beyond transcendent. That's the typical 3 realms of meditation. God as a present entity, the animation of all the worlds, the life energy and life force of everything. Then we also believe that God is not just defined by His ability to create. He's also transcendent, way above and beyond the creation of this world. But that's still somewhat of a relationship to this world. It's like, you're not just the creator, you're also bigger than me. Then He's beyond transcendent.
This could be a personal question, but so when you meditate, what's your sort of visual, when you're trying to conjure Hashem up, do you have like a visual?
A visual of God?
Yes.
No.
So it's just
I don't have a visual of God.
Screen but you have
it's like light. The closest we have is light. But that's really godliness. Godliness is light. But there are many visuals that you can use as metaphors for different parts of Hashem's relationship with the world. Like the Midrash says, the same way a soul fills the body, God fills the world. And so by examining the relationship of your soul to its body, you can get an insight into God's relationship with the world. And such. Many, many different types of different things. And again, chapter 41 and on is all about that. But the key point is that you have to be connected to something in order for it to be connected to you. And the way that we connect to things is through ideas, through the mind. There's a shliach in London, Rabbi Shmuel Lu. I think he's one of the oldest shluchim. He's got to be one of the oldest at this point, right? What is he, like 80 something, like in his late 80s. He was the last one to merit that the Rebbe officiated his wedding. When the Rebbe came to America in the 40s, so some students asked him to officiate their weddings, and he had different conditions. If the groom committed to grow a beard, because in those days many Jews were assimilating and, not looking the part. So if the man would agree to grow a beard and the woman would agree to cover her hair, so he would officiate the wedding. And then later there was more conditions added. If you had to commit to go on shlichut, to open up Chabad presents, and it became more and more scarce. Even after the Rebbe became Rebbe in 1951, he kept on doing it for very few and far between couples. They actually have a book that they made in 1999 where they collected all these pictures and diaries of what happened at these weddings. Fascinating stuff. Anyway, in 1960, the Rebbe said, I'm done. I'm too busy. It's just impossible to officiate weddings now. And if I do one, people will get jealous, and we're done. So he got married in 63. But his father-in-law had an extremely, extremely close relationship with the Rebbe. Rabbi Zalman Jaffe, you can read about him, fascinating stuff. Very, very close. And the end of it is a long story, but the end of it is the Rebbe officiated his wedding. Last one, 15th of Tammuz in 1963. Anyway, so he, either it was for his own children or later, he was a teacher. I got to look up the story. But the bottom line is, this is back in the day when corporal punishment was still a thing. You were allowed to hit kids and nobody was going to look the other way. So he found himself losing control and hitting these children, and it bothered him. He was upset about it. Yeah, it had to have been as a teacher. The story wouldn't make sense if it was his own kid. So he asked the Rebbe, I believe it was in a private audience, he asked the Rebbe, what is a tool that I could use to avoid hitting the kids? So the Rebbe said, you should meditate on the fact that every child, every Jewish child, is God's only child. And when you're hitting a child, you're hitting a child of God. And he said, that was it. Never happened again. Not because the Rebbe told him, but because he actually exercised the meditation. If you don't exercise it, I can tell you all you want. Hey, your child is a child of God. Yeah, very nice. When I'm angry and I lose control, that's it. I get emotional and I do it whatever needs to be done, or whatever I think needs to be done. But if you actually meditate and you put it to work, the meditation will change your behavior and it will change your feelings. The Rebbe himself actually told a story in 1965 at a Farbrengen. You know what? This is a good theme to close with. First, little history. The previous Rebbe the Rebbe's father-in-law, came to America in 1940 and immediately began tons of activism to bring more Jewish awareness in America. Besides for his programming, he would also teach, like any Rebbe would teach. Unfortunately, in 1945, he had a stroke and he lost his ability to speak. But he still wanted to deliver teachings. So for every major Jewish holiday, he would write a discourse or edit a previous discourse that he had once put out. And this became like the teaching for that holiday. So for Rosh Hashanah, this is the thing. He didn't deliver it orally, but he delivered it in writing.
Would someone read it out loud?
No, everybody would just study it. It was printed in a booklet and everybody would study. In 1950, this is 5 years later, the 10th of Shvat was on a Shabbat. 10th of Shvat was a personal date for the Rebbe's father-in-law because his grandmother passed away on that day. So he said, we're going to put out a discourse for this day. And it was a discourse that was entitled Basi Legani, I Come to My Garden, 20 paragraphs. And he put it out for the day of Yud Shvat. Friday afternoon, it came back from the print house, and all the Chassidim got a copy of it. The next day, Shabbos morning, 7:45 a.m., the Frierdiker Rebbe passed away. On the same day of his grandmother's, on Yud Shvat. And because of this, the Rebbe saw in this discourse the previous Rebbe's last will and testament. He said, yeah, it happens to be, it was printed for his grandmother, but it turns out that it was printed for the day of his own passing. Which means that this is his marching orders to us. And what did he do? For the next 20 years, 1951 to 1970, on the 10th of Shvat, when he held the Farbrengen for the yahrzeit of his father-in-law, he would expound on one of the 20 paragraphs of his father-in-law's last discourse. So every year, the Maimer on Yud Shvat began with Basi Legani, and every year you knew it was going to be the next paragraph. So 51 was paragraph 1, 52 was paragraph 2. 1970, paragraph 20 he finished. In 71, no one knew what's going to happen. He started again. He went back to paragraph 1, and he said, this is what Chassidim should do. Every year you should focus on one paragraph. So even after the Rebbe himself stopped delivering discourses, but everybody just kept the round going. So 1971 to 1990, they finished the round. Then it went again, 1991 until 2010. And then 2011, they started it again. So what's this year? 2025 is paragraph 15 of the Maimer. And so if you go back, when was the first time they did paragraph 15? 1965. So at this Farbrengen in 1965, the Rebbe tells a story. He says there was a villager called a Yeshuvnik. And this Yeshuvnik, as many Yeshuvniks in those days, they were illiterate. And how would they educate their kids? They would hire a malamed, they would hire a teacher to come in for 6 months, from Rosh Hashanah to Pesach. Then they go home for Pesach, and they come back from Pesach to Rosh Hashanah, stay for 6 months, and you teach the kids, and they pay them. So the story goes that one day the malamed, the teacher, is sitting in the home, and a letter arrives for the Yeshuvnik. But the guy can't read the letter. He's illiterate. So he opens up the letter, and he gives it to the teacher. Says, you read the letter. Tell me what it says. So the guy reads the letter, and it says, Dear Yeshuvnik, this is to inform you that your dad passed away. As he's reading the letter, the villager breaks down and faints. So they revive the person, and he goes through whatever mourning he has to go through, and the whole thing. So the Rebbe said, the Chassidim used to ask a question. Why did the villager faint? The teacher should have fainted. He's the one who knew how to read the letter. He's the one who knew what it says. The villager couldn't even read the letters. He didn't know what it says. So how come when they read, this is to inform you that your father passed away, how come the villager fainted and not the teacher? So the Rebbe said, you can hear it on the recording, the Rebbe said, Val si zayin tate. Yiddish means that because it's his dad. The teacher is just reading the letter. It's disconnected from his reality. But the villager, it's my dad you're talking about. The news affected him deeply because it's his own father. And the Rebbe said, Judaism has to be the same way. Many times we make Judaism somebody else's dad. It's like their issue. No. It has to be your dad. Own it. Own your own relationship to Yiddishkeit. How do you own it? How do you make it your dad? In the story, it was his dad biologically. That's just my dad. How do we make Judaism our dad? We make Judaism our dad when we meditate. We have to give ourselves the luxury. Not even the luxury, it's just what we deserve. Give ourselves what we deserve to indulge in getting to know our own religion. I tell this to people all the time, especially the youngsters that we deal with. And they have so many questions, and after 30 minutes of talking about Jewish meditation, they're already comparing it to Buddhism and this and that. No, you didn't even give yourself a chance to study Yiddishkeit. Just for your own neshama, give yourself a chance. Whatever you decide after 2 years, go to yeshiva for 2 years. Afterwards, tell me I don't believe in it, I do believe in it, I buy it, I don't buy it. But you have to be able to say, hey, I didn't just learn Judaism from Instagram and TikTok. I also studied the texts. It's my own, it's my birthright, it's my heritage. We all need to give ourselves that gift. 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, more if you can, the more that you can. And the more the mind assimilates these ideas, the more you will find yourself thinking about them. And the more you think about them, the more real they will become. So that's the Benoni's calling, and it's our calling. Let the mind become the channel to the heart, and then you'll find yourself doing everything you need to do. L'chaim.